Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa, and today I'm here with UBC Students for Freedom of Expression. And today we have Cynthia, and she is an advocate against porn. And so she thinks that, well, she can explain a little bit more about what her mission is with that.
So basically, my mission or activism is based on raising awareness and educating people and sharing the education on the harms of pornography. And it's a topic that many people aren't aware of, and it's not within the mainstream yet. And hopefully, one day it'll be well known in the mainstream, kind of like advocacy against climate change and poverty and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. So with that, like, why are you so concerned with the production, distribution, and the exhibition of pornography, like just as it is? And also, if you want to define what pornography is for people who kind of have not as much a substantial, like, of a good idea of what it is, or a definition, a clear definition.
Well, to start with the terminology, the word pornography comes from Greek and Latin origins, and pornai stands for whore, harlot, prostitute, hooker, and graphia, which is a Greek stem, it stands for records or literature works or even artworks. Like basically anything that gets recorded in the form of being recorded would be considered graphic. So if you combine the word pornai with graphia, that stands for recorded prostitute or recorded prostitution. And so basically nowadays most pornography is prostitution behind the camera. So filmed prostitution in other words.
Mm-hmm. So why is this the focus of your advocacy for the emancipation and liberation of women? Like, why is this the forefront of your project? Why isn't it about, like, emancipation for women in the means of, like, say, business or economic means? Like, why is it through this?
Well, the harms of pornography is very, very complex. There's the scientific aspect of it. There's the moral aspect. There's also the spiritual aspect, because some people have their own religious thoughts regarding pornography. And there's also the radical feminist analysis on pornography as well, or the anti-porn feminist analysis. And pornography is essentially sexual objectification of particularly female bodies for the most case. And like what people don't really realize is that when females or males are sexually objectified, that reduces them down into sexual body parts to be compared and scrutinized. So that can be really problematic, and it can actually relate to mental health problems because it can cause viewers and people who are growing up within this pornified culture or this porn-conditioned society that they're not sexually attractive enough, they're not good-looking enough. And so it can actually cause a lot of females to feel like complete crap to the point where they seek out cosmetic surgery, and that can come with negative consequences because it can be really risky for the health, and it's very, very costly as well.
Yeah, so do you think, like, on the rise of cosmetics and cosmetic surgery and all of that, like, comes with, it definitely correlates to, like, a more pervasive porn culture?
Yes, absolutely. Like in pornography, mainstream porn, for instance, and even in animated porn, like anime and manga, the females typically have really small waists and really large breasts and an ample butt. And that kind of body type is not realistic for most of the female population. They're not able to obtain that kind of body image naturally, and so they would have to go underneath cosmetic surgery and photoshopping to obtain these images. And we see that a lot on Instagram. like there's this whole porn culture that's happening online on the internet, and you'll see like a bunch of images, like even in Snapchat, of underage girls too, unfortunately, having pictures of them looking hypersexualized, trying to imitate porn performers or porn models, for mostly to get validation, likes, and follows. Because that's the kind of culture that we live in nowadays, where society bases the worth of girls and women based on their physical appearance and their sex appeal. And of course, this would cause a lot of mental health problems in girls and women, especially body dysmorphia disorder, like self-body image issues. And yeah, there's the science behind this as well. When a viewer watches pornography over time, they're training their brains to become less attracted to females in person, including their own partner and their own spouse, and more attracted to the bodies in these images. It has to do with rewiring processes in the brain, and rewires the neurochemical structures and whatnot. And when the brain, or parts of it, is being hijacked and desensitized, of course, that's going to change the person's ideal standards on what they find attractive and appealing. And that can make them more critical of their partners or spouse and real girls and women.
For sure. There's like a lot of real life implications of porn that could be detrimental to a lot of otherwise healthy relationships and turn them into kind of not so much. And I have a critical question for you actually right now. Some women actually in the sex industry do see it as a type of sexual liberation, and how would you argue against this? Like, how would you say that it's actually not? Like, would you talk to them and kind of reason it out and say, like, oh, this isn't actually good for you, or you know what I mean?
There's a lot of misconceptions regarding the anti-porn movement. Like, some people think it's all religious-based, but there are anti-porn activists who come from non-religious backgrounds. And a lot of these activists typically have a feminist perspective towards pornography, or a more scientific perspective, or a combination of both. And back then, feminism was always about against sexual objectification and liberating girls and women from patriarchy, which includes prostitution as well, or the sexual commodifications of their bodies, like the buying and selling of female bodies. And pornography relates to that because, as I mentioned earlier, most of it nowadays is filmed prostitution. And unfortunately, the first American pornographer, Hugh Hefner, he was the one who kind of twisted or distorted feminism. And he was pretty much the person who started third wave feminism, kind of, like it was leading to that. And that's when a lot of the fundamentals and the principles of feminism got thrown out and completely distorted. And he tried to make females think that it's sex positive to cater to the male gaze. But of course, there are mental health implications with that. And that's, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't aware of that, or so much aware of it. It's kind of complicated because feminists today, like, we can all agree that sexual objectification of females is wrong, but essentially that's what pornography does, and that's where the hypocrisy is in modern day feminism.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer.
You're welcome.
I was actually wondering, because I'm personally interested, does your brand of anti-pornography go against not only like mainstream pornography that's the most like accessible, like you can probably you can name the most popular websites and like kind of guess what I'm talking about, but like would it also go against like self-made I guess sex workers, independent labels and producers, and actresses, and what is your take on those types of mediums?
Well, first off, I'd like to address the term sex work and sex workers. Anti-porn activists, especially anti-porn feminists, don't use the term sex work or sex workers because it glamorizes and normalizes prostitution, including pornography. And it's kind of like if you can imagine handing out resumes to employers. Like, it wouldn't make sense to mention that you have experiences giving blowjobs for 5 years. Like, it just doesn't sound appropriate at all, right? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And also, I would just say that sex isn't work. I mean, there's this negative implication with porn culture too, and hookup culture if you connect the two. So basically, pornography reduces the value of bonding and connecting with human beings, and so when people call sex work, like sex is work, it doesn't. It's really an injustice towards the majority of prostituted females out there who are sexually trafficked, because to them it's not work that they agree to do. It's not just any work, but it's modern day slavery, and so such definitions would actually normalize prostitution.
Okay, so I've noticed that you've talked a lot about how pornography subjugates women in a position where they are, only regarded as insofar as their sexual qualities are considered, and kind of scrutinized also, as well as
Exacerbated.
Yeah, exacerbated. What about like gay pornography? Would you say the males are also treated in the same light?
Yeah, similarly, because there's still sexist power dynamics involved, like the dominant masculine one and the feminine submissive one. And so in gay pornography, the submissive feminine one would basically be in the same role as females are typically in pornography, where they're submitting to the dominator. And so that can create unhealthy views on sex and sexuality, and it has a lot to do with control and abuse. That's part of it as well. And gay pornography, it doesn't matter if it's like lesbian, bisexual, gay, like it's still dehumanizing towards the individuals that are on the screen. It's still reducing them down into sexual decorations or simply sexual entertainment for the audience.
What are your thoughts on erotic text or erotic arts that are not really exaggerated sexual features, but are more geared towards the emotive side of sexuality?
So like erotic literature,
Kind of
books, and also visual traditional erotica.
Right.
Okay, so those two are two different things. So the first one, I didn't really clarify this in the beginning, but when I was defining pornography, there's also, like, some people would confuse non-sexual nudity to pornography, and they're not the same things. Because of pornography, there's going to be that sexual arousal side, like that intention from the artist or the producer to cause the audience to feel sexually aroused to the body in the images. Whereas in artistic non-sexual nudity, like the whole intention of the artist is different. It's more on the aesthetic side. But regarding to traditional erotica, like it can date back all the way to the caveman ages. It's completely different to pornography that's typically shown nowadays. There's a lot of evolution that's been going on, and of course pornography nowadays is a lot more hardcore, and it's just over exaggerated, and it's kind of ridiculous. But it relates to porn addiction as well, where the person or viewer goes from one material to a more hardcore version. But in regards to regarding literature porn, like 50 Shades of Grey, for instance, which is not a positive light of how sex is viewed. It's more so like violence being sexualized, especially on girls and women. So it's like a very unhealthy depiction of it. And of course, there are those within the BDSM community who criticize 50 Shades as well, because it goes against mutual consent, and because, again, the unhealthy sexist power dynamics between the male and female protagonists. But regarding pornographic literature overall, like the less hardcore, less violent versions, unfortunately there haven't been any peer-reviewed research or scientific studies done on that, or brain scan studies as well. So we can't exactly say for sure if it's as bad as visual porn. But hopefully, as a psychology student, hopefully one day I can suggest some kind of research to see if there are any negative consequences to literature porn besides 50 Shades of Grey types.
Yeah, and maybe you can also be the one to conduct those experiments. That'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll go on to the next question. I only have a few more left.
Okay.
So what does your anti-pornography activism how does it relate to freedom of expression, and does it threaten it in any way, or at what point does it go at what point does it permit sexuality not to be a violation of freedom of expression, and when is it a violation?
I was wondering you can kind of reiterate or clarify your point.
So I'm saying, is it a breach of freedom of expression to be involved in any way, or to prohibit or kind of promote this type of ideology against porn?
Well, the whole point isn't to target those who are in pornography.
Right.
It's more so targeting the patriarchal system that's beneath it, or the whole sexual objectification that's related to it, and also the scientific harms and consequences that porn has on society and viewers and the people around them. So ideally, there would be no such thing as pornography on this planet, and it would help a lot with the growing mental health problems nowadays. And of course, it would lead to more stable families, relationships, like monogamous relationships or exclusive, and marriages as well. And it would be great for these kids who are in these families, and the wives too, or husbands. But unfortunately, pornography is, it's almost everywhere within Western cultures, especially, even in Japan, which has been westernized. And the whole point of anti-porn activism for now is to raise awareness, to make the harms of pornography become mainstream, so that the whole public and everyone would be aware of the harms of pornography. Because currently there are people who think that porn is harmless, and there are people who aren't aware that there's such thing as the anti-porn movement. But one day when more and more people, when it becomes mainstream that everyone or most people are against pornography, then it'll become easier to have legislation to filter porn from the internet, especially towards younger children, or towards children and youths as well. Because kids are easily susceptible to addictions, especially if they're below the age of 25. It can vary for women because there are recent scientific evidence that females have younger brains than males, for 3 to 5 years age gap in between.
I never heard of that one before.
Yeah.
It's a new research, right?
Yeah, it's new.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a lot about the ill effects of pornography. I was wondering, when you suggest this to other people, the general public or your friends, family, people that might not even support you or know about this issue, what kind of reactions or common criticisms do you face?
Well, to start off, my own family, most of them initially weren't supportive of me being an anti-porn activist. They thought it was kind of a waste of time. It's mostly because they lack understanding and knowledge on how pornography harms, not just for the individual, but also on a societal level. So it's just not a personal thing. And also, I've been facing a lot of criticism or objections or hate, I would say, like verbal abuse online, especially. And also when I was putting up posters around to look for anti-porn activists, because it's actually kind of lonely for the most part being an anti-porn activist offline, because I do have a lot of support online too. But when it comes to being an anti-porn activist offline and being on campus, it can be really isolating, because I just feel like my voice isn't being heard, and I've tried. I put up posters around, but sometimes they'll get thrown away. Sometimes they'll be vandalized, and there are student groups in the student union on campus who are against the anti-porn movement, and it's mostly because they don't understand it. They think that it's a SWERF movement, which and SWERF is an abbreviation for sex worker exclusionary radical feminists. So basically, it's a term that people who defend prostitution, pornography use on people who are trying to advocate against prostitution, including pornography. So that includes anti-porn activists. But again, it doesn't make sense because the anti-porn movement isn't just solely feminists. There's all kinds of people from different backgrounds who are fighting against pornography. And so they would brush the movement off or brush anti-porn activists for being SWERFs. And it's just a way to silence them from sharing the harmful impacts of pornography that many people aren't aware of. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of misconceptions about the anti-porn movement, mostly because people haven't really heard of it within the mainstream. Most people aren't aware of it and what it means and what it entails. So hopefully one day more and more people would realize that before making quick judgments and attacking the movement.
Right. So how do you deal with the opposition? And when you do get these kind of aggressive reactions or hostile reactions, like, what do you do? And also, do you think they misunderstand it, or do you think that they're completely opposed to it for whatever reason they have?
I think a lot of it has to do with misunderstanding and just remaining ignorant because there are scientific evidence that's growing, more so on the anti-porn side, and a lot of these people who are opposing the anti-porn movement, they're not looking into the scientific evidence. They're not willing to learn, so they're just brushing it off as a religious movement or a SWERF movement. Or they just simply call us prudes because we're anti-sex. But again, it doesn't make sense to call anti-porn activists anti-sex because there are growing research regarding statistics among the young populations. And more and more young people are having less sex as they're watching more porn. More and more young men are dealing with erectile dysfunction. There's a skyrocketing statistics in that, and it's really unusual if you compare it to the days before there was internet porn. So yeah, like these people, they don't really look into that.
I see.
Yeah.
So our last question is, what would the best case scenario be for tackling the new age and era of a pornified culture? And, so what would be the solutions that you have right now? I know you're working on a major project and organization that I really applaud you for. Like, I wish I could do something as grand as that. And how, sorry, 2 questions. Last one. Okay, you can answer this first.
Okay. So how do I deal with these oppositions? I just, I'm not gonna lie, it does hurt a lot sometimes when people tell me that, oh, you're not gonna change anything, or, oh, you're just, an outright prude, and whatnot. But I just kind of brush it off, and the more I expose myself to anti-porn activism, and the more I keep talking, the more numb I get towards these hate. And in a way, it kind of motivates me too sometimes to push even harder, because I do understand that people, they don't really understand the harms of pornography, and so it gives me more reason to keep on advocating against porn. And regarding the campus situation, I've been contacting admins, and hopefully one day there will be an anti-porn student club on campus, because it's really unfair that anti-porn voices are not being represented. That includes my voice, and of course that causes a lot of anxiety within some students, including myself. Yeah, so it'd be nice to have that sense of belonging in that community by having an anti-porn student club on campus.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What can we expect as a culture to observe if we continue allowing this course of a pervasive porn culture? What will we see in the next few years?
Within the next few years?
Like in relation to how pervasive and accessible and, hardcore pornography is, in this day and age.
Yeah, it's actually kind of scary to think about it because regarding porn addiction, viewers would typically go from one hardcore material to more extreme forms. And so, let's say if the anti-porn movement isn't continually being pushed into the mainstream, then pornography will become more of a growing issue within society, like an underlying issue that many people aren't aware of, and the harmful impacts of it will just continually grow, and mental health problems are increasing as well. So within the next few years, if the harms of pornography isn't being addressed in the mainstream, and if the government isn't really doing a good job on that and treating porn like it's just a neutral issue or it's a harmless issue, then of course that's going to cause a lot of mental health implications on young generations especially.
Thank you for listening to yet another conversation we have with a really cordial and lovely guest we have today.